The best advice anyone ever gave me was 2 words. You can't. And you know what my response was? 2 words. Watch me.
Welcome back to the Believing is Achieving, Why Not You podcast. How you doing, Phil?
Good, Danielle. How are you?
Good. Thank you for taking some time while you're on your break to talk about this week's topic. And due to the fact of where you are, do you want to introduce the topic?
Yeah, this is a great opportunity. Tonight's topic, we're going to talk about built on duty, natural bodybuilding, and the first responder. And coincidentally, it's been a challenge because I've been putting in quite a few hours over the last few weeks, especially on the night shift. So it kind of all comes in perfect timing, and this was a good opportunity to catch up where we could use this topic and talk about the importance of how to squeeze things in, like working on this podcast during a break opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, with our, schedules and anyone that's working shift work, it's always very hard to get time for the gym, family, balancing work, doing meal prepping and all of those things. So let's talk a little bit more about that and how we build a schedule around shift work.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. That we're definitely going to work right through this whole shift work process. So excuse the backlighting thing. It's tough to call. The white lights were way too bright. So for those watching it on YouTube, you may notice the red lighting in here, which is actually designed, for better vision and not to impact your night vision. So just wanted to give a heads up on that. But let's talk about first why this topic matters. Your schedule may not be as crazy as a full-time rotating shift, but you have worked a lot of nights and overnights. So first responders face unique physical and mental demands, and a lot of that has to do with shift work. And natural bodybuilding also has a lot of physical and mental demands. So it's a good tool for resilience and longevity in our field, and not so much for vanity. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think they, coincide very well. And, if you have the dedication and determination to be in a career in law enforcement, you have exactly what it takes to do the same in bodybuilding.
Absolutely. And, I just want to share our quick disclaimer that, this is our natural bodybuilding philosophy based on our experiences and our own educational experiences and not medical content. So, there may be some things you agree with or disagree with, but this is just coming from our firsthand knowledge and experience of this. So, now let's talk about the first responder realities. I know we made some notes because we want to touch on some important parts of this. We want to acknowledge that the job always comes before the gym, and life priorities absolutely have to come first. So we want to keep that in perspective. So why don't you give us a little bit overview of some of the first responder schedules and the things that we deal with?
Well, depending on, where your job is and what position you're in, you could have rotating shifts. You could be on steady midnights. You could have some midnights. There's always that forced overtime where you least expect it. You're told you have to stay a few more hours or even an additional half a shift. And then there's holidays and weekends. So when everybody else has that time to go get in the gym and to go relax with their family, sometimes first responders are working through that and trying to navigate, being with their families on the holidays, making time for getting to the gym. And it's also a lot of physical stressors, such as, sleep deprivation and a lot of gear and equipment. So there's a lot that goes into the scheduling and also the physical aspects of first responders that can make it very challenging.
And I'm glad you said it that way. It can make it very challenging, but not impossible. And, as we, look through these and I'm sitting here thinking and the reality around me, when you talk about midnight tours, one of the challenges years ago when I first started working out and working as a policeman was finding a gym that could work around my schedule. So a lot of times I would have to go, right from getting off midnights when you're totally exhausted and try to get some kind of workout in, or get up early. Maybe you didn't get enough sleep. You're getting up early. You're trying to get to the gym. But some things have changed over time that have helped with that. And one of the things we've experienced more recently is that, joining a 24-hour gym, which has certainly made training a little more easy with our schedules to get there when we can get there. And as you said, you talked about holidays and weekends. A lot of gyms had shortened hours. I know ours even did when we owned it, which made it challenging for first responders to get in there. So I guess the key is when we talk about the realities, we also want to look for ways to adapt to those realities, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know from firsthand experience having a boyfriend who's also a first responder, there's times that, though he may be on nights, he goes to the gym, first thing in the morning after his shift. Sometimes he goes before his shift, and sometimes when he can't sleep because he's so used to being on nights and that schedule sticks with him even on his off days, he'll find himself in the gym at 2 in the morning and, keeping that schedule to be consistent with his shifts.
And bringing him up, I know his department is one. I was going to talk about this a little later in the podcast, but the timing's good. Some departments recognize the challenges that their officers face, and departments do want their officers to be in the best possible shape they can for their own safety and to perform the job. So a lot of departments allow officers a certain amount of time on duty on their breaks to train for the benefit of the officer and the department. And you're seeing more of that.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads into the physical stressors and some of the things that we face with having these, shift work and crazy hours. And, I think one that we both really see is the sleep deprivation.
Absolutely. I've experienced a little bit of that now working the night shift versus my day shifts, and I've been flip-flopping a little bit. So it's challenging. Today was a perfect example. I know we've been trying to get this podcast in, and my schedule's kind of prevented it, and that's why I'm glad we figured out a way to squeeze it in here. But for instance, today I went to lay down, and personally, as you know, I have 3 dogs in a house, and every time a squirrel or a kid on a bicycle or an Amazon truck goes by, it sets off the barking parade, and that disrupts your sleep. Now you're combating that. You're trying to get back to sleep. You just get back to sleep, and it starts all over again. So I know exactly where you're coming from with that.
And then that also leads into, some of the gear that you wear and some of the physical stress and tolls it takes on your body, wearing, the vests and having your weapon and your duty belt, that all, puts pressure on your body. And then adding the workouts on top of that, that sometimes could lead to injury if you're not taking care of your body, doing the proper stretching before you, exert a lot of energy into your workouts.
And I don't think the average person realizes what it's like with all that gear on. I remember when I'm, going back a while when I was in full uniform, depending on what equipment I had on, sometimes that vest and all the equipment you have on, your belt, radio, your body cameras, all those things add up, tasers, and it could be upwards of 30 plus pounds you're adding onto your body that you're moving around, sitting in a car with. A lot of times that gear on your belt will press into your back while you're sitting in the car. So you've got to find, time to get in and out of the car, to kind of, to your point, stretch it out and take those pressure points off. And it's long hours in all conditions, so you're out there with, rain, snow, long nights with, running from call to call, things like that. So trying to balance all that and still balance, your meal plans, your workout times, your energy and your dedication, can be a lot, but you got to stay focused on it.
And, the next topic of, the whole idea of mental and emotional stress and, the load that carries on your mind, that's something that I'm very passionate about with my background in mental health. You know, all day long you're being hyper vigilant. You're, responding to these, critical incidents that are coming up without any warning or preparation. And that takes a toll on you, just during the length of your tour. And then after that, you're trying to get to the gym if you haven't gone yet, and you have family at home. And from personal experience, if my boyfriend and I are on separate schedules, sometimes we don't see each other for days because I'm going to the gym to work. By the time I get home, he's now gone to the gym and to work. So it puts a strain because though we live together, we sometimes don't see each other for 3, 4 days at a time.
Oh, easily. For many years that would happen when I was working rotating shifts, especially with small children. A lot of times your children are in bed before you get home, with the young ages, and you're gone before they get up in the morning. So there'd be days when you were little that I wouldn't even see you for 3 or 4 days, and have an opportunity to interact with you. So that's a great point, that you add that family and relationship type strain on top of all the workload, and then you still want to get to the gym. And a lot of times people will dismiss the gym and say, you know what, it was just too busy of a night, or I have too much going on, I'm not going to make it. But what they're discounting is the importance of that time in the gym, that alone time to decompress, get a lot of that stress off, and find a way to relieve some of that tension. And that's where bodybuilding is a great tool, and just mixing that together, can really pull you out of those challenging situations.
Absolutely. And as you get into the topic of bodybuilding, let's talk a little bit about why traditional bodybuilding advice often fails first responders.
Well, let's face it, bodybuilding, as we know, meal prepping, planning, everything, it's really built for a predictable lifestyle. They talk about the importance of needing a stable recovery, um, you know, uh, just that routine makes it a lot easier, and that's really what it's built for. So you have to get a little more creative when you're a first responder, or more so, obviously a first responder on shift work. And like I said, tonight's a perfect example of that, where we were struggling to find time, between my job, hitting the gym this morning, trying to get that podcast in. It's just finding those creative ways to make it work, and relieve the stress of having that over you.
Absolutely. And I mean, depending on your shift, depending on, how many days you're on and off, every police department, every agency is very, very different.
Absolutely.
Um, you got to find what works for you. For me, I know Sunday nights, that's my meal prep night. I get everything ready for the week. For days I'm working, days I'm not working, I set it up the same so that I'm able to get everything done. But if I know my Sunday's going to be busy, or I have a shift that I'm scheduled for, I got to make it work, and I got to find a way to keep on to my goals, but also manage work in there. And sometimes that means kind of deviating from my traditional routine, but finding, food or finding time to get the gym in. And it might not always be exactly how I want it, but I'm staying consistent with my plan.
That's it. And you're staying focused on it. And, there's going to be those times, you and I have talked about it, where, you've either texted me late at night because you're on call, and you're getting calls in the middle of the night, and you've disrupted sleep, and you just can't pull together enough strength or energy to really know you're going to have an effective workout. So you've said to me, hey, that's going to be a recovery day for me, and I'll pick it up tomorrow or the next day. And remember, that's something I want to stress. I mean, Rich Fitter talks about this with us all the time. Recovery is not weakness; it's risk management and injury mitigation. If you are that tired, if you just can't pull that workout together, and you go in the gym and you're trying to keep up with what you would normally do, the amount of weight or the amount of cardio or something, you're putting yourself at risk for injury, because your body's just not there. So when you're tired, remember, that's your body breaking down. Your reflexes are going to slow down, and those injuries are more likely to occur. So listen to your body. That is part of the process. What we're stressing here is, don't let it become the whole process because of your schedule or the challenges you face. You just have to find some creative ways in addition to that.
I mean, and Rich says it all the time too, that especially those weeks where, I am sleep deprived, or, even you now with all of your shifts you've picked up. It sometimes that third rest day that you don't account for, but it just happens. It's not going to break down all the progress you've made. It's not going to
Right.
destroy your plan. It's going to build you up to be a little bit better. And then, that next week, you don't take that third rest day. You get back to your two rest days, or whatever it is that your plan allows for. But you can't live your life around it has to be this many days in the gym, because that's only going to set you up for failure and injury.
Right. And, we've talked about this in other podcasts. Rich has always said, missing a workout or adding a workout is not going to change, where you are as a bodybuilder. Like you said, a lot of times it's better to miss. And I've noticed recently with the shoulder rehab and recovery, I was having some challenges with that, and I threw in a couple of extra rest days based on my schedule, but I pressed myself to understand that they were rest days for a purpose. And as I'm going back the last week and a half or so, I'm noticing I'm feeling better, I'm feeling stronger, and I'm not feeling those pains. So that was my body kind of telling me, hey, I'm breaking down, pay attention to this. So let's
Absolutely.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, and that's like the core reason that this, traditional bodybuilding advice fails for first responders because it truly is built for people whose lives revolve around training, and that's what their, sole purpose is. They're looking to train for bodybuilding,
Right.
where first responders are training for survival. They want to go home at the end of the night. That's the, first, most important. And then after that, it's staying in shape for the job and then adding the bodybuilding component to it as well.
And traditional bodybuilding fails cops because it assumes control, right? Assumes a controlled environment, and law enforcement lives in chaos and unknown conditions, as we know. But in a way, I kind of like that challenge because it forces me, just like on the job, to stay vigilant in what I'm doing and look for ways to get better, or to focus on what's coming up ahead of me. And that's what I try to do with the bodybuilding. To your point about your meal prepping on Sundays, I was sitting here before we came on looking at my schedule for the next week, and I know, like, next weekend coming up, I'm going to have 3 night shifts with a day shift prior and a day shift after. That's going to be a challenging weekend for me to get some workouts in. So I'm pre-planning how to work that in around my schedule now. So it's a process.
And even like we talked about in, our last podcast, it really does take an army, and having that support system and having people around you that can help you, whether it be, you really have nowhere to squeeze in that meal prep and, they're able to make a meal, or, you're held over at work and you're able to call home and say, hey, listen, I'm going to be home at this time. If you're making dinner, set mine aside and just let me know what it is so I can track it. It's having that extra help along the way to help you meet those goals.
I agree. It's certainly more challenging if you're doing a lot of stuff on your own, and having that team behind you, much like being in a first responder and law enforcement. A lot of things are accomplished as a team. So, do you have to do things by yourself sometimes? Yeah. Nobody else is there with you lifting the weights or whatever. And sometimes nobody's with you on that particular call as a first responder that you need to be prepared for. But having a team makes it that much easier. So, I could see where you're going with that. Let's talk a little bit about why bodybuilding does appeal to first responders.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it and, from the notes that we made, it really does completely coincide with one another. There's the discipline aspect, the consistency, the integrity, and even the long-term thinking that really, you know, bring the two, the law enforcement field and the bodybuilding together, because those words are, you can use them in either the sport or the profession.
And I'm looking at my notes here as well, and I'm going down this, and I'm thinking just today, you and you talk about discipline, consistency, integrity, and long-term thinking. We've touched on every one of those today personally. We were disciplined enough to be in the gym first thing this morning on a Sunday morning. We both knew we had stuff to do tonight. We found the time. We're consistent with it. We follow our routine and our pattern, breaking when we have to for legitimate purposes. And integrity is a big one. I mean, integrity in law enforcement is everything. And it's the same in bodybuilding, because you have to be true to yourself and the sport and what you're doing, or you're not going to accomplish the goals. And definitely long-term thinking. As I said to you before, I'm already pulling out my calendar tonight and looking at the week ahead and finding ways to plug in, those workouts, those meal preps, the things that need to be done.
Absolutely. And I mean, even going past that, there's so many benefits to it beyond just the aesthetics, injury prevention, which we both are
Big one.
really
Yep.
aware of. Um, Functional strength and confidence on the job. All three of those come to mind right away.
Looking at the injury prevention, you talk about injury prevention from the perspective of you're strengthening your body. Anytime you strengthen your body, you're less likely to injure your body. And with that, you're going to sharpen your focus and your attention to detail, because you're paying attention to what you're doing, the movements, developing that strength. And when you're on patrol or you're out here, on the job, attention to detail is everything. So there's a lot of benefit that transitions over. You talked about functional strength, like I talked about getting in and out of the car with an extra 30 plus pounds on. I mean, those are things you don't consider the benefit that comes from that. and the confidence on the job. What's the biggest priority they talk to you about when you first go in the police academy, right? Command presence. You walk into a room, you want to have that command presence to be able to handle any situation or let the people there know, hey, I'm prepared, I'm here, I can handle that situation. And same with bodybuilding. You get on that stage, you want to have that command presence, and it all comes together, the strength, the mobility, the focus, and it comes out in that command presence.
Absolutely. And I
Let's talk
mean,
about let's talk about natural bodybuilding as a sustainable model.
absolutely. I mean, there's the longevity in the sport, the job and life, health markers, and, career spanning fitness. It keeps you on track, physically and mentally, throughout your career, whether it's law enforcement or bodybuilding. Um, it's just, they just go together so well. And I think I've seen that, especially over the past year of, being in the off season and growing in my strength and, confidence in the gym. And it does show in the job because I feel better. I know I'm getting stronger. I know I'm capable of more things. Um, and it keeps me in check and it keeps me accountable at work. And, I just feel healthier. I feel better. And looking back, not that I've been on the job that long, but even, in the few years that I have, I can notice a difference as my career in bodybuilding progresses, as well as my law enforcement career. I really do see that I've kind of come out of my shell in the past few years.
Yeah, I think that's a good connection you're making there. I think that the confidence that you build doing both is kind of hand in hand. And you're seeing more and more. I know we do at competitions, and some of the people we follow on social media that are in the bodybuilding sport, a lot of them are professional firefighters, police officers, EMTs. So it's kind of a growing family.
Absolutely. I mean, every time, we go somewhere, whether it's a, bodybuilding show or a posing clinic or whatever it might be, you do make those connections. And a lot of people say the same thing that, it's keeping you in shape for your profession. And it's something you can enjoy that's benefiting you for a, 30-year career.
Let's jump on for a minute down to talk a little bit about nutrition challenges for shift workers.
Well, I mean, in law enforcement, the biggest thing is, you're sitting down for your dinner or your lunch, and of course, everybody wants to go out to the, restaurant in town, or, people bring in food, and, you're so tempted in this profession to eat and enjoy, the things that you're given or that are put in front of you. And sometimes you got to be on track, especially with bodybuilding, to your nutrition, but it can be hard, especially on a night shift when, the only things really open after 8 or 9 o'clock are fast food and, sometimes some coffee places that don't always have the most healthy alternatives.
Well, that's where the challenges come in, and I want to touch on that now a little bit about meal timing. Let's say on midnight shifts, I'm laughing. I'm looking over, and I have the cooler in the car here that I'm just able to show here. And the challenge with midnight shifts is it's not always controllable based on your caseload, call volume, or the operation hours of the businesses in town. So you're very limited, and you need to adjust the best you can and stay focused not to go too far off track. I mean, there are many nights you're driving around and you find out at 2 in the morning, the old joke about cops and donuts, but really the only thing that are open at those hours are occasionally a fast food chain, a convenience store, or, a coffee and donut shop. So, most guys don't have the time. They're just like, I'm just a little hungry between calls. I just need something to keep me going. So they run in and grab that donut or that, buttered roll or bagel or what have you. But you need to think about the wise choices, or kind of, as you and I have said, meal prep. I have everything I need in the cooler tonight. You got things like almonds, some fruit, turkey, bottles of water, things that can sustain you over those periods of time.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of challenges that come in your way. There's been many of times that I'm, wrapping up to leave for the day and, we get a call that we need to go out to something or, there's a detail that we need to sit on and no one's available, who's available. and I'm now out of all of my food. So then it's a matter of, okay, well, I don't have time to go to the store and prep something. So what is the healthiest alternative I could find to go grab food before I have to go? Or, having that go bag in the back of the car that has, the trail mix, the healthy one, the
Right.
almond, the protein bars, the little protein shakes, whatever it is that you might need so that you can avoid those, wrong food choices when you're, pinched with an overtime or a rotating shift.
You know, when you brought up the to go bag, I always go back to a funny story. We had a tactical team call out one night, and we used to make fun of one of the guys on our team used to carry a Ziploc baggie of peanuts in his bag, and it was always there. And he used to call them his tactical peanuts. And I remember we were out on this call doing a perimeter for hours, and it was starting to get to the point where we were going to have to start breaking people for meals and stuff, and restroom breaks or whatever. And he made jokes later on that he wasn't going to need the break because he had his tactical peanuts with him, and he was able to sustain himself through the call. So after that, everybody pretty much had their own bag of tactical peanuts. But you're right. It's preparation, and that was an example of where he was even preparing with good things that would sustain him versus a candy bar or something. One of the other challenges is hydration. You got to make sure you have proper hydration with you, and think about that at times. But also caffeine dependence and the crash cycles. That's the Achilles heel for most cops. And here we go again. I can give you a visual in the car is the 20-ounce coffee, but I've also got the water right next to it. So I'm prepped for the shift tonight. But so again, we talk about opportunities and solutions. Meal preps for duty bags. We just shared some examples. Look at your high protein options. Okay, portable high protein options. Keep your nutrition as consistent as you can, but it doesn't have to be perfect when you're in these situations. Just keep balancing it, and use a strategic flexibility. Rich Fitter talks about that all the time, a flexible nutrition plan. You can adapt within your macros, so if you do have to have that that one snack or something that might not be the best for you, but you need something to get you through, don't let it get you down, don't let it get you off track. Just snap right back in as soon as you can. Why don't you touch on a little bit about the sleep recovery and hormonal realities with bodybuilding?
Well, I feel like we've definitely discussed, shift work and sleeping can be difficult. Especially if you're on midnights and, you have family at home when you come home, or there's people in the house, dogs, that can all disrupt your sleep. And if you're not getting, the proper adequate sleep, then you're definitely going to be sleep deprived, and that will impact your training schedule. Or if you have, weeks that you're on call and you're getting a call at 11 o'clock p.m. and then you fall back asleep and that phone goes off at 2 a.m. and then, your body can't get right back to sleep. I think one of the biggest myths out there is, well, you can catch up on sleep the next day. There's no catching
There's
up
no
on sleep,
no.
or those quick cat naps or that 20-minute power nap is, not going to benefit you as much as having that uninterrupted, hopefully 8 hours of sleep that's, recommended. But
And that's one of the things so many people get wrong. Everyone thinks that the muscles are built in the gym. We know the muscles are broken down in the gym for the opportunity to rebuild during your recovery and sleep times.
And then I always go back to, Rich and talking about rest, and that, again, recovery is not a weakness. It's really a tactical decision to do what's best for
Absolutely.
your body, just like you would on the job doing what's best for your team to make sure that everyone goes home at the end of the call or the end of the night. You have to tactically decide what's best for your body, because you don't want to walk out of the gym with an injury that'll not only affect your bodybuilding, but also your profession, because you
Your
need your
career.
body to
Yeah,
work.
I agree. Let's talk a little bit about mental toughness, identity, and burnout for a second.
I mean, there's always that all or nothing thinking, and that's, something that you want to avoid. Bodybuilding should be a stress relief, not a pressure. And I think that's something that I've lost sight on, and finally gained back. It should just be building you up, not breaking you down.
I,
And
No, I agree with you. And when you hit on all or nothing, it got me thinking from the bodybuilding side. I think where some people get hung up is if they think they can't get an entire workout in, they decide, well, I'll skip it for today. So that's where we talk about, you and I, breaking it up a little bit. It's about getting the reps in over a period of time, not necessarily in that one day. It could be a week window or what have you. So just something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, and looking into opportunities that are unique to first responders, um, you can kind of flip the narrative a little bit and think about, that the shift flexibility, when managed correctly, can actually benefit you. If you're working a night shift and you're able to work out in the middle of the night or those early morning hours, you're going to have a gym that's near empty. I mean, we know the 4 a.m. crew is the
I
same
love it.
people. You're able to get on your machines, get on your exercises, and get out of the gym within, an hour if you need it.
I can't go back to regular hours. I love those mornings when you can do whatever you need. Um, you know, the other thing is the brotherhood, sisterhood, and accountability. We have that in police work. I find the same in bodybuilding. You have that support system. Other people are doing the same job as you or the same sport as you, and they're very supportive. So, these are opportunities that are really unique that marry up. And I've experienced those, and I know you have as well.
Looking at, the thought of competition versus the career and finding the balance and thinking about, off-season priorities and choosing the right season to compete and all of those things. I think I've kind of navigated that with the sense of I was finishing up, my master's this year. I was working a little bit crazier hours and I decided to take the off year because I wanted to get through school, not have that pressure, get through, all of my interning hours I needed for school, kind of get where I needed to be in work. And now I'm able to balance work and bodybuilding as opposed to, three different things where I felt like I was constantly juggling. So finding that balance is also very important.
Yep, you get that alignment set, and then you get a vision on what you want to accomplish, and you just stick to it as best you can. Um, I know we're going to be running out of time here shortly, and we have so much we could go through. We tried to cut this down. I know you and I have looked this over many, many times to kind of streamline it because we can go in 100 directions with this, and I think we probably will do another episode down the road on this. I know we've had a few inquiries about it,
Sure.
but let's go and do a little this segment. We'll give some practical takeaways, things we've experienced, but best advice for a rookie first responder lifter. For me, I would say it's critical to maintain a level of fitness in this job. It's critical to maintain balance. So if you can get into some kind of fitness plan, for us, it's bodybuilding, doesn't always have to be, but we bring it from that perspective. Find something that works for you, stay focused, stay with it your whole career because it's going to pay dividends physically, mentally. It's going to be a good guiding tool for you.
I mean, I can speak to that just being kind of still in my coming out of my rookie phase, still kind of in that area of my career. I'm seeing it already. I'm looking at people that have 20 plus years on, 15 years on, and, it's almost like sleep. You can't play catch up.
Right.
So, starting the career this way, feeling so confident so early on, it'll only help me in my career and stay that way because whether you're 22, 42, or 52, your goal is to come home at the end of the night and to be the best that you can be. And even in bodybuilding, same thing. You want to be as healthy as you can be and the best that you can be.
That's right. And it's all about keeping yourself safe, your body safe, and longevity. I made a note because it was important to me. Biggest mistake shift workers make in bodybuilding. And to me, I'm going to go back to the word balance. I think it's balance. I think a lot of shift workers feel like they just have to get into the gym on those days and get that workout done. So they don't let their body get the rest it needs and they force themselves into injuries. So that's what I see. Is there any mistake that you might recognize differently or you agree?
I agree. I think the biggest thing is, kind of pushing yourself that little bit too far and, injury. And that's the last thing you want in a law enforcement, career or in a bodybuilding career is to have that setback of an injury.
Uh, I agree. And because that plays with you mentally, it weighs on you, and then you wind up, either giving up or, finding reasons not to go on. But I think I just want to give one last point, and then I'll let you close out. But one habit that for me, I recognize that moves the needle the most, I would say, is balance. Keep everything balanced. Give yourself a break, as Rich would say. When you need it, give yourself that break. It's all about balance. You have a training season. One day here and there is not going to make or break the season. Don't push yourself to that point of mental, physical exhaustion and injury.
Absolutely. And I think, kind of closing out before we, officially close out, I just want to say if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you want to hear more, you can reach out to us at Team Crosson LLC on Instagram, Team Crosson LLC on Facebook. And then if you want to go to our YouTube channel, we're at Team Crosson Podcast. And honestly, I think, again, this is all information that we have from our own experiences. If you have different experiences or even advice for us, you can always reach out to us as well.
And that's a good point. And I wanted to say that, look, we're not experts. We're just sharing experiences we've had for amateurs that are trying to get started, want to get started, or not understanding what it might be like in these situations. So take it for what it's worth. Take whatever value you get out of it. And in areas you think maybe we're totally full of shit or don't know what we're talking about, certainly we can agree to disagree. But again, it's based on personal experiences. And just to point out, if anyone gets a chance and they're just listening to us on the podcast, there's an opportunity, if you look at the YouTube channel, to see how we adjust to those schedule changes, because tonight I'm actually doing this podcast with you from the car on my break. So this was a pretty cool opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm doing it from my work from home desk that I do, my late night hours sometimes, or when I'm finishing up a case, I'm sitting here. And before we close out, I think one of the, a great line for the profession, but also, bodybuilding is we don't train despite the job, we train because of it.
Oh, that's a great line. And I have nothing more that I can add to that. So that's a perfect closeout. Danielle, I want to thank you for all your time putting this together tonight and working around my schedule.
And I want to thank you for taking the time on your break to get on here and talk with us. And as always, if we can do it,
why not you?
Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Stay safe out there.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.